Top of the 8th, tied game, bases loaded, 2 outs. The most consequential at-bat of this Brewers-Pirates game so far. And Brett Phillips delivered.
Confidence and driven toward right center field. And Brett Phillips is going to clear the bases.
While not as illustrious as his World Series walk-off single 2 years later, a bases-clearing late-inning go-ahead triple is nothing to scoff at. Well, unless you're the mid-July 2018 Pittsburgh Pirates.
Look at that roll to right side, that sneaks through, that gets the Pirates a run. Pirates trail by 2. It's a gigantic double play, and now it's up to Freese with 2 outs to find a way to get Bell home. Launched toward right center field, pretty well hit, off the wall, tie game, David Freese into third with a pinch hit, game-tying triple.
A 3-run comeback capped off by what was definitely the most noteworthy opposite field 2-out, 2-strike game-tying triple of David Freese's career. However, in this impromptu battle of 21st century World Series clutch hitters, Brett Phillips came out on top as he gave the Brewers the lead in the top of the 10th. Phillips had won the battle, but unlike 2020, he hadn't won the game.
Line drive towards center, over the head of Kane. This might win it. Runner being waved home. He's going to be safe. The ball gets away. They've won 5 against the Brewers. Unbelievable.
Under a scenic downpour, Josh Bell delivered not only the 8th Pirates win in 9 games, but the first 5-game sweep in MLB since 2006. Still, with a record under 500 at the All-Star break, this rarity was set to be nothing more than a footnote in yet another disappointing Pirates season. Until it wasn't. In reality, this walk-off win was the peak of an 11-game winning streak just weeks ahead of one of the most consequential trades in team history. But first, we need to understand the context behind the motivations that led to this infamous trade.
The standing room only crowd trying to get under Johnny Cueto's skin, and they might be. That ball's hit well to left center field. And that ball is gone. 2-0 Pittsburgh.
That right there is the roar of a crowd who'd been long deprived of postseason baseball for 2 decades. The culmination of a multi-year project constructed by general manager Neil Huntington, a project built upon a foundation of new age analytics. This expertise was not only used to emphasize certain strategies such as infield shifts and inducing ground balls, but also to supplement their homegrown core with overlooked players such as Russell Martin, Francisco Liriano, and AJ Burnett. While the 2013 team ultimately lost in the NLDS with an offensive core led by 2013 MVP Andrew McCutchen, a top-tier pitching staff, an ability to uncover undervalued talent, and a #1 farm system heading into 2014, the sky was the limit for the Pirates.
Near the wall, and it is gone! Walking off, raise the Jolly Roger, Josh Harrison.
However, following a promising 2013, they lost in consecutive wildcard games to the Giants and Cubs, respectively. Now, as the stat rankings prove, the Pirates certainly weren't a bad team during this period. If anything, the roots of the Pirates' struggles were actually self-inflicted. Take a look at this. This is a graph displaying the end-of-year payroll rankings of every 2015 playoff team. 70% of these teams held above-average payrolls. Only the Mets, Pirates, and Astros could say otherwise. But as the Mets and Astros increased their payroll through the rest of the 2010s, the Pirates wasted the playoff window their competitive analytical advantages afforded them in order to fuel a roster carousel instead of splurging on established talent. Worst of all, this ultimately led to the trades of 2 stars ahead of the 2018 season. Garrett Cole, and Andrew McCutcheon. Cost-cutting moves team owner Bob Nutting attempted to sell as a directional shift towards a stronger future. However, this narrative wasn't alleviating an angry fan base, and with playoff odds of only 8.8% on opening day, it was shaping up to be another uneventful season. But then, the Pirates began to win, and they kept winning until they were 9 games over 500 after game 43 of the season. This may not sound that impressive, but this was actually the first time since 1991 where the Pirates began a season this well. Still, a measly 43-game stretch to begin a season isn't enough to determine a team's outlook, as 48 games later, following a brutal 16-32 stretch, the Pirates' record was much more aligned with preseason predictions, as they were following the familiar path back into baseball purgatory. Until they began winning again. And they kept on winning until they accumulated 11 victories in a row, transforming their second half outlook. An inexplicable run where the Pirates ranked the best in Team WRC Plus and Team ERA. A span where Corey Dickerson, Gregory Polanco, and Starling Marte each hit at least 5 home runs. A baffling yet absolutely dominant 11-game stretch. But this wasn't seen by the front office as solely a random streak, rather an opportunity, or lifeline. So how would they capitalize? Well, as they sought a starting pitcher with years of control, they were connected with longtime staple of mid-2010s trade rumors, Chris Archer. While not an ace per se, he was one of only 6 pitchers between 2013 and 2017 to produce a 1.10 ERA plus and record 1,000 strikeouts. The combination of consistent production and a team-friendly multi-year contract made him a coveted target by many teams, but those who checked in found out fairly quickly that the Rays would have to be overwhelmed to consider a deal. Desperate to retain the eyes of a growingly restless fan base, GM Neil Huntington made a deal the Rays couldn't refuse. The Pirates acquired Chris Archer for former top 10 prospect but struggling pitcher Tyler Glasnow, once consensus top 10 prospect outfielder Austin Meadows, and a player to be named later, who turned out to be 19-year-old pitching prospect Shane Baz. Knowing the methodical, risk-averse deadline strategies of the mid-2010s were a major contributor to the closing of that playoff window, but also seeking to avoid star rental players who'd leave at season's end, the Pirates chose to acquire a long-term player in Archer. An outcome that both excited and infuriated Pirates fans given their reluctance in the initial playoff window, but with 2 months left in the season and only 3 games to make up in the wildcard race, the Pirates had the opportunity to alleviate their past missteps.
Moustakas, a high drive, deep right field. This one's gonna fly. That one is hit hard to right center, and the Pineapple has launched one out of here.
Against the team they walked off in dramatic fashion a month prior, the Pirates' headline trade acquisition clinched a series loss in the midst of a dramatic tumble down the wildcard standings, ultimately falling out of the playoff race a month later. Perhaps a no better microcosm for Archer's disappointing tenure in Pittsburgh, a tenure characterized by regression and injuries, ultimately leading to his release after the 2020 season, 1 year following the firing of Neil Huntington. A once promising team initially built under the systematic integration of sabermetrics, it was the failure to utilize these unique advantages to their fullest potential in terms of roster construction that limited their postseason capabilities. And once they finally deviated from this risk-averse mindset, it was too late. The rest of the league had caught up to their methods, and regression had taken over.
Rays coming off a victory last night, 6-1. So Baz all set to go to work.
On April 1st, 2025, Shane Baz, the player to be named later of the Archer trade, faced off against the Pirates for the first time ever. How did Baz perform? He threw 6 shutout innings and 10 strikeouts, a great outing for the former top 10 prospect. However, his big league career has been bumpy to say the least. From Tommy John surgery in late 2022 to a promising 2024 stint, and now an underwhelming 2025. Still, at just 26 years old, he's got time to live up to his once elite prospect pedigree. Now, someone who did live up to their prospect pedigree was Tyler Glasnow. Following a downright awful big league tenure in Pittsburgh, Glasnow broke out in 2019, later criticizing the Pirates for operating behind the times. But unfortunately, injuries have been a major theme in his career, as he surpassed 120 innings only twice. Still, when on the mound, he's one of the league's nastiest pitchers, which was enough for the Dodgers to take a gamble on him, acquiring him ahead of the 2024 season and immediately signing him to a 5-year, $136 million extension. In this trade, the Rays acquired prospect Ryan Pepio, who has since turned into a solid mid-rotation starter. However, this is far from the only trade left in this story. We've got one more player to mention. Outfielder Austin Meadows. Like Glasnow, Meadows underwent a breakout 2019 season, except he actually played nearly the full year. In fact, he's one of only 12 outfielders since 2000 to produce 30 home runs, a 140 OPS plus, and 4 B WAR at the age of 24 or younger. After a 2020 season mostly spent on the IL, Meadows returned in 2021 with some solid above-average production. Then, to the shock of many, Meadows was traded to the Tigers ahead of the 2023 season for infielder Isaac Paredes, a former top 100 prospect who hadn't quite acclimated to the big leagues. Unfortunately, Meadows only played 42 games across 2 seasons with the Tigers due to both physical and mental health struggles, notably his battles with anxiety. Following the 2023 season, he was non-tendered by the Tigers and has stepped away from baseball ever since. As for Paredes, not surprisingly because it's the Rays, he underwent a breakout season in 2022, transforming into a legitimate offensive threat. Then 2.5 years later, in mid-2024, because it's the Rays, he was traded to the Cubs for a package headlined by power-hitting utility man Christopher Morel. A few months later, Paredes was on the move once again, this time in a package for superstar outfielder Kyle Tucker. A trade that's been the definition of a win-win deal. Overall, this is quite the intriguing trade tree, especially for one that stems from an 11-game winning streak back in 2018. Although, sadly, 7 years later, even following another rebuild under a new front office regime, the Pirates have maintained their risk-averse, cheap ways of conducting business. We have a generational talent in Paul Skeens, and we've somehow had a worse offseason than last year. No serious Pirates fan is expecting us to spend like the Dodgers, Mets, or Yankees, but is it too much to ask to add a serious bat to supplement the rotation? Well, when Bob Nutting is team owner, I guess it is. The Pirates and their fan base regret the outcome of their 11-game winning streak 7 years ago. But the roots of this regret stem from the actions, or should I say inaction, of Bob Nutting. And until that changes, you'll continue to hear chants like this.